Hey everybody, so today I'll be reviewing the Samsung Gear S3 Frontier LTE edition. So off the bat, I want to clarify a few things that was confusing to me when I was looking at purchasing this particular smartwatch. So first thing is the different models that Samsung offers in this. So they offer two Bluetooth models. One is a classic that has that silver bezel, and this is the Frontier version of it, which has this dark gray gunmetal-like bezel. Secondly, they have one LTE model as well. So that LTE model comes in this Frontier style, which is obviously what I have. I have the S3 LTE Frontier Edition. So this is only available from your wireless carrier. So you can't go to a retail outlet like a Best Buy or an Amazon and pick up this LTE model. So I know that was confusing to some people. They're purchasing it from those places thinking it was the LTE model, and it is not. If you want the LTE version of this, you can only purchase it from a wireless carrier in the US. That would be T-Mobile or AT&T, and they're going to require a data plan. So a wearable data plan for T-Mobile, that's going to be $15, but it'll net out to be only $5 a month because they'll give you $10 a month in bill credit. So that's just clarifying some of the differences in some of the models and the LTE versus Bluetooth editions and versions of this watch. The next thing is compatibility. So what will this smartwatch work with? So definitely not iOS. There is no iOS compatibility right now as of this recording. It'll definitely work with Samsung Galaxy phones, and it'll also work with other Android phones that are non-Samsung phones. So here's Samsung's official statement about compatibility with other Android phones. So they say, quote, compatible with select devices using Android 4.4 and later with at least 1.5 gigabytes of RAM. Supported devices may vary by carrier and device, and some features may not be available. So I've had this connected to my HTC 10 for over a week, and so I'll get into this review from that perspective. What is it like to have this smartwatch connected to a non-Samsung device, and what does that some features may not be available really mean? We'll get into that a little bit later in the review. So first off, let's get into this particular Frontier LTE model device. So as far as size, fit, and finish is concerned, this Frontier to me is the best of both worlds. It's very versatile in how it looks. It can blend in with different environments, from a very rugged environment. So if you're working in a construction or you do a lot of sports and outdoors activities, this is great for you. But if you also go into different types of environments and settings, maybe you need to go into an office every once in a while, maybe you need to go out to a nice dinner in a nice restaurant, this model provides you that flexibility. And you can do that by simply changing out this silicone band with some alternative watch bands, and it really just changes up the look. You can get a different silicone band color. You can get leather bands. That combined with changing out the watch face really allows you to customize this watch to any kind of a environment or setting you might need to be going into. So I've got a video on that. You can check that out if you're interested. Other things about the physical hardware here, it only comes in a 46 millimeter size here, so it's a rather larger watch. It's a 1.3 inch display with Gorilla Glass SR Plus to protect the glass surface here. It's IP68 certified, water resistant, so all that really means is that you can dunk this and submerge it in water up to 1.5 meters, or that's roughly about 5 feet. It has military grade durability, so it can withstand some drops and some extreme temperatures. So if you're into a lot of outdoors, or you work in the outdoors and you're a little rough with your watch, it should be able to take some of that beating. Watch bands on this device. So it uses a standard 22 millimeter watch band. These Samsung and then Samsung approved bands have this quick release mechanism to make it really easy to take on and off. But you can use any 22 millimeter watch band. So you've got a lot of customization options. You're not limited to just those by Samsung or approved by Samsung. You can use any standard 22 millimeter watch band and really make this watch yours. Now, as far as display and how that looks as far as brightness and always on mode. So this being a Samsung device, it's got a 1.3 inch display, like I said, and it's an AMOLED display, so it gets very bright. You can go in here and reset the brightness, and I usually keep it at 4 or 5, and that's plenty bright for me. But you can see here, all up to 10 is very, very bright. So that'll really help with that sunlight readability, and outdoors readability is not a problem. Perfectly fine for that. Always on mode. So I use it in always on mode. So let me put it on so you can kind of see what always on mode looks like. So I usually keep it on, and in this style of a watch face, if you kind of There you go. So this is what always on will look. It'll dim it back a little bit, and it'll disable some of the watch face features to kind of conserve on some of that battery power. And if you activate it, so you can see the rest of the watch face lit up, as well as some of the additional features of that watch face come to life. So this is the full watch face when it's fully on, and then if we take it back and put it into always on display mode, it'll really dim it out and recess some of those features. Sorry, it's a bit tougher on camera there. But I normally don't use a complicated face like this, since I always keep always on display mode on. I like to use a little more simpler watch face most of the time. And I'll usually use something like this where to take advantage of that AMOLED display with that black background. So AMOLED displays will only light up the pixels that are needed. So this black does not require any of the pixels and the light to be lit up on that display. So it's only lighting up where you see that white text. Helps with the battery life. And that's what that always on display mode looks like with this digital watch face. So it's really easy to glance at without having to bring my wrist all the way up to activate the watch face. So I can really glance to find the time. I can glance to find any other bits of information that I want to put on that watch face. So that's why I really use it and like to keep the always display mode on, because it's very visible, it's very nice, and I can glance at my information without raising my wrist a lot. And it makes it also look like a regular watch if people were just to glance at my wrist and take a look at it there. It's not black. It's not blacked out. It looks like a real watch. So let me touch on battery life with that. So using always on display. If you always use always on display, what is that going to do to your battery life? So with this watch, Samsung states that you can get up to 3 days of battery life. In my usage, I typically get about 1.5 to 2 days. And I try that with and without the always on display. And so I noticed with the always on display, it didn't really matter much. I didn't take too much of a hit to battery life. It was almost always about 1.5 to 2 displays with or without that always on display for me. So it didn't make a significant difference enough for me to disable it, which is why I use it. So regardless of my usage with or without it, I was getting 1.5 to 2 days. Your mileage may vary depending on the watch faces that you use or what you do with your watch, but I primarily use the watch to receive notifications, reply to a few notifications. I don't use a ton of apps on this, but I'm getting a lot of notifications during the day. And so I usually get about 1.5 to 2 days on that. Next is around battery and charging. So charging, it comes with this wireless charging dock, and it's magnetic. So you can see it's very sturdy. You really have to flick it to get it off. So it sits magnetically in place, and it uses Qi charging to charge. And so a lot of the common questions are, if I had a Gear S2 and I have the Gear S2 charger, can I use that to charge the Gear S3? And the answer is yes and no. So you can put the Gear S3 onto it and you can charge it. It will charge. What I notice is a message will come up on here saying that it is recommended that you use the original Gear S3 charger. And so I didn't notice that initially when I tried this. I just set it and walked away. And when I came back, I saw the notification saying to use the original charger. And then I picked up the watch, and it was heating up fairly significantly. So it was a lot warmer than usual. And I also tested this with a standard Qi charging plate that I have, and the same result. It would charge, but that warning would come up and it would get a little bit warmer than usual. So I always use the approved and official Gear S3 charging stand here, and it definitely does not get as warm. So I'm not really sure why that is, but Samsung, I would recommend you follow Samsung's recommendation and only use the approved Gear S3 charger with this, because you never know what other chargers, even their own S2 charger, might do and could possibly damage the watch or the battery. The other thing that I want to mention was around software. So the Gear S3 is running Samsung's proprietary Tizen OS. It's version 2.3.2 out of the box. And like I mentioned, I've been using it with my HTC 10 for a little over a week now. I currently have it all reset here, which is why you don't really see many steps or anything else, because I recently paired it up with my OnePlus 3T. But as far as phone and messaging with a non-Samsung device over Bluetooth connection, so you can initiate and receive phone calls as well as texts from your phone's number. So while connected over Bluetooth to your smartphone, if someone calls you, sends you texts and you pick up that call or you reply to that text, as far as that other person is concerned, you're using your smartphone, not your watch, which is fantastic. And that's really what this is meant to do. So you can not only glance and receive your notifications and reply to some of them, you can take your calls, you can respond to texts, all without having to run over to get your phone or pull it out of your pocket. And that's really the benefit of a smartwatch, and that's primarily how I use it. Now, the interesting piece comes in is when you start to do some of these things over the LTE connection. So this being an LTE-enabled device, as you walk away from your phone and you get out of Bluetooth range, it'll vibrate and buzz and let you know that you're out of Bluetooth range. Then after 30 seconds, it'll connect to the LTE signal, and a few seconds after that, it will show you this, connected remotely, meaning you're now connected to your phone over your carrier's LTE connection. So you'll be receiving all your notifications and everything else that you normally receive over Bluetooth over that LTE connection. And so over LTE, some of the quirks come into play here. So, and this is with a non-Samsung phone. I noticed that this T-Mobile version cannot initiate calls or texts using your phone's number. If you make a phone call or if you text somebody with this phone while remote connected over LTE, it will use the phone number assigned to this watch. So if you call somebody or if you text somebody from this watch while connected over LTE to your phone, they may not know who it is if they don't have this watch's assigned phone number. And so that's a big downside. That's a lot of the reason why you'd want to get this watch, is so you can leave your phone behind if you want to go exercise, walk the dog, do whatever, and you don't want to take your phone with you. Or if you just have maybe a large property, large house, and you walk out of Bluetooth range, you don't want to be missing your notifications. You don't want to be missing calls or texts. And more importantly, if you had to call someone or text someone, you'd want them to think it's coming from your phone. So again, with this LTE version from T-Mobile connected over the LTE to a non-Samsung phone, that's not going to happen. The good news, however, is that you can answer phone calls and you can respond to texts that you receive. So while connected through the LTE connection to your phone, if someone were to call you, you would receive that call here, and if you answered it, they would think you're on your smartphone and not on your watch. The other thing is if they texted you as well, and you would get that text here, you could respond to that text and it would look like you're responding from your phone. The only limitation, like I mentioned, is when you try to initiate calls or initiate texts, it's going to come from this number. But if you receive anything, you receive a call or receive a text, you can take that call, you can respond to that text, and it'll all seem like you're on your smartphone. That being said, here's where Samsung's disclaimer around some features may not be available and may vary from device or carrier. So, like I mentioned, I've had this connected to an HTC 10 and most recently to my OnePlus 3T. And what I noticed there is that I cannot respond to text messages while connected over LTE used from the HTC 10. So if I'm remote connected over LTE to my HTC 10, if a text message comes into my watch, I'll get it, but I can't respond to it. If I hit reply, it says it goes and tries to open the messaging app on my HTC 10. So that defeats the whole point of having a remote connected smartwatch. What's odd is that it works perfectly fine with the OnePlus 3T. So again, while remote connected over LTE, I get a text from my OnePlus 3T, it'll show up on my watch, I can respond to it, and it'll look like I'm responding from my phone, no problem. So there are some differences between Android phone and phone manufacturers, and for whatever reason, and it's not the application because I was using the Google Messenger app on both devices. So there may be some quirks between devices, and that's just one example between those two. So just something to keep in mind there. But to kind of net it all out, if you're connected over Bluetooth, you're perfectly fine. Messages, initiating calls or texts, responding to calls or texts, all will look like it's coming from your smartphone. If you don't want to hold up your smartphone to your face to take a phone call like Dick Tracy, you can always just connect a Bluetooth headset to your watch and you can take your call on your watch through your Bluetooth headset. The last bit to remember is if you're going to be using this to forward your calls from your phone over LTE, you're going to need to remember to go into the Gear Manager app on your phone to set up that call forwarding. And the one negative there is once you're remote connected like this over LTE to your phone, and to be able to get those phone calls on your watch, you actually have to physically go in and say forward phone calls. So here's call forwarding. And there is no auto option. So on the old Gear S connected to a Samsung device, when I went out of Bluetooth range, it would put me into remote connection mode like this, and then it would automatically turn on call forwarding. Here, on the Gear S3 connected to an HTC 10 or a OnePlus 3T, a non-Samsung phone, once I hit this remote connected state here, I have to physically go in and turn on call forwarding. It won't automatically turn on. And then once I turn it on, and then I come back into Bluetooth range, the watch will auto-connect over Bluetooth, but it won't turn off automatically the call forwarding. So I'm going to have to come in here and physically turn off call forwarding. So it's an extra step, and if you don't remember to do it, you're going to miss out on calls. And or when you reconnect from Bluetooth and you don't turn it off, it's going to always try to forward the call anyway. So a little bit of an annoyance there that you have to manually flip on and off call forwarding. I think that should automatically happen, and I'm pretty certain it'll automatically happen on a Samsung phone. It just won't do it on a non-Samsung phone, like my HTC 10 or my OnePlus 3. So that's just another thing to keep in mind there. Moving on to other things like email. So if you want to get email and respond to that, that's not been a problem while connected to these non-Samsung devices. I use Gmail, and I use a third-party email client called 9, and I'm able to receive email notifications. I can respond to my email through both those on my watch, no problem. And the last thing to kind of remember is that some of the promised applications. So at launch, Samsung promised key apps like streaming services from Spotify. So there's supposed to be a Spotify app for your watch where you can just stream Spotify from your watch, which is very key. And I'm assuming one of the main reasons why you'd want an LTE model. It was definitely one of mine. I want an LTE model so that I could leave my phone behind and I could do the majority of the same things I do on my smartphone on my watch. But I can't do that here as far as streaming music. So there is no other streaming music app. Samsung used to have their Milk service, which was based off of Slacker Radio that's been discontinued. And without Spotify, there are no streaming music services that you can play and stream directly from your watch to a Bluetooth headset. There just are none. And so if you want to get LTE to be able to do that, you can't do that as of this recording. So that's one other thing to keep in mind as well. And the other reason why you probably want to get this is to double it up as a fitness device. So if you're into that, you can use S Health. And S Health has a ton of standard fitness features where you can track your caloric intake. You can look and use it as a pedometer to track your steps, your floors climbed, various different exercises. So you can track a run or any other type of an exercise since it has built-in GPS. You have their social networking together feature. So if you've got friends or family that also use S Health and you want to compete and push each other, this is their social way to stay connected called Together. It'll auto track your heart rate, so you can see your heart rate over time. You can track your water as well as coffee intake. And some of the settings here are fairly interesting. So if you go in here, there's health nudges. So if you want to be nudged to stand up and stretch or do any of those other types of things, it'll do that by default. You can go into here to turn that off if you don't like that. There's workout detection. So if you want to auto detect that you start walking or running or doing any of these other activities like cycling, etc., you can do that. And they're all enabled by default. And if you don't want it to auto track that, just flip them off here. So that's workout detection. You can also adjust your step target. So by default, it's 6,000 steps. If you want to lower or increase that, you can do that here. Same with your floor target, as well as turning on or off the auto heart rate sensor. Setting water as well as coffee targets all can be done from the settings. So that's a brief look at S Health. One thing to note about this, so a lot of companies have health incentive programs, and most of them, just like mine, are using Fitbit. And so even if I wanted to, I could use S Health, but I couldn't send the S Health data and qualify for those health incentive programs. So I think that'll be a roadblock of some sorts a little bit for getting some traction on the S Health in a meaningful way. So that's just another thing that I want to point out and kind of keep in mind. That's just something that I run into on a daily basis. I turn on the S Health features just so that I've got it, but I've also got a Fitbit just because that's the only way for me to participate in those health incentive programs. So just one more thing to keep in mind. And the other key feature here that's new on the Gear S3 is Samsung Pay. So a lot of people are concerned, can I use Samsung Pay on a non-Samsung, while connected to a non-Samsung phone? And the answer is yes, you can. So I've been using Samsung Pay from the Gear S3 while connected to my HTC 10, no problem. To activate Samsung Pay, just press and hold this button. It'll launch Samsung Pay. Then all you have to do is hit a button, say Pay, hold it next to the terminal, and you're good to go. Since I reset this device and connected it to my OnePlus 3T, I have not reset up Samsung Pay yet. But if you wanted to do that while on a new device like this, you would just press and hold. This takes you into the initiation of the setup. And so it's basically a step-by-step of how to set this up and use it. So it'll just follow the instructions here. It'll auto walk you through how to set up Samsung Pay on your phone. It'll download, install everything, walk you through setting up your compatible cards, credit and debit cards, and it's a really quick and easy process, and you'll be good to go that way. So just make sure that you've got a compatible credit or debit card with Samsung Pay, and you should be perfectly fine. For example, my credit card is not compatible, but my debit card is, and which kind of limits my usage of this. I tend to rather use my credit card because I get mileage, but I tried it out on my debit card just to try it with the watch, no problems. So that is Samsung Pay there. So really quickly, some final thoughts. Some positives, I think it's some great hardware. It's very sturdy built design because it's the Frontier model. It's designed to be rugged, and it certainly is built very well and designed that way. It's got a gorgeous, beautiful AMOLED display, very bright, very vibrant, great for outdoor readability, and it does the basics well. So if you just want to watch to tell time, obviously, as well as to manage your notifications, this watch does that very, very well, and it does that with a very, very smooth experience. The negatives, like I mentioned, it cannot initiate calls or text over LTE for non-Samsung devices. So if you wanted to get an LTE model and you wanted this to operate like completely like your phone, it can't do that as far as initiating calls or texts. It's going to come from this watch's number. Secondly, the key promised apps aren't here. Uber's not here if that matters to you, but more importantly, streaming music apps aren't here. Spotify's not here, so you cannot stream music from this LTE device, which is why you'd probably want the LTE device as well. You want to be able to stream music when you don't have your phone, when you're exercising, walking around, whatever it may be. You can't do this as of that recording. And lastly, it's only one size. So it's a 46 millimeters in size. If you don't like the larger watch size, you do not have any other option in the Gear S3 model. So that is definitely a negative there. So bottom line, this is retailing for $400 at T-Mobile for the LTE version. Is it worth that $400? No, I'm going to say it's not. I wouldn't recommend someone spending $400 on this watch right now when the AT&T LTE version as well as the Bluetooth version are both retailing for $350. I think it needs to be at least $350 before you really can start considering it. And even then, depending on all the different positive and negatives I just mentioned, coupled with that price, you'll have to determine if that's worth it to you. But I would not recommend it at $400. And lastly, should you upgrade from the Gear S2? So if I've got something like this, which is the Gear S2 Classic, should I be upgrading to the Gear S3? And my answer is only if you want the newer hardware and the larger watch, and or if you really just want Samsung Pay, then yes, I would recommend you upgrade, but only when that price comes down a bit. If you've already got the Gear S2 and you don't want a larger device, definitely not, because the Gear S3 only comes in this larger 46 millimeter size. And if you don't upgrade, don't feel bad for not upgrading. The Gear S2 is still a fantastic device. It has all the features of the Gear S3. The only thing that it won't have is Samsung Pay. So unless you really want Samsung Pay, you're not really missing out if you don't upgrade. So that's my review and my thoughts on the Samsung Gear S3 Frontier LTE version. But if you have any other questions or comments about this device, let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks very much for watching.